Hi everyone, this is Unleashed and today we have Darshani and Apoorva built from UMD Moksha, and I guess we'll do a quick round of introductions. I'm Jayesh. My classical experience is for 2 months, and also introduce yourself with your favorite mudra. My favorite mudra is because it's a turtle for UMD Moksha. So I'm the biggest fan. Do you guys want to go?
Hi, I'm Darshini. I am currently UMD Moksha's treasurer, and last year I was their captain. I've been on the team for 3 years and very excited to be on the show and chat with you guys.
My name is Apurva. I was UMD Moksha captain 2 years ago, and I was on the team for 3 years. I am now an alumnus.
This is pretty nice. Has a nice ring to it. Okay, so the first thing I did want to ask about is for classical dance, you guys have probably done it for so many years. I was wondering, especially within UMD Moksha, how did that translate, that classical experience? Was it more, did you find more meaning within classical dance being in UMD Moksha? And at the same time, like, what were your favorite memories and experiences being on UMD Moksha? Anyone
Sure.
can take it
I
away.
in Bharatanatyam when I was around 5, so had been doing it for a long time before graduating or going to college and auditioning for and joining the team. Um, I kind of remember or I kind of think about my like dance journey in phases a little bit. So the first phase is kind of being a kid and not liking it, honestly, and doing it because it was something my parents put me into. And then the next phase is realizing, no, I actually do really like this and I really like learning and dancing. Um, and that came a little bit later, more in high school, training for my Arangetram, which I was supposed to do in 2020, um, which did not happen in 2020. And I think like being forced to postpone it from it really um, was hard at first. Honestly, like wasn't sure if dancing or if I'd like do my Arangetram um in whatever post COVID, like what we had thought that would be like back in 2020. So then when I was able to like train and actually complete it in 2021, that really like strengthened my relationship with dance and like really made me love it. And kind of pushed me into auditioning for Moksha, I'm sure. But it definitely helped me grow as a dancer and love it more and think about it more creatively.
Yeah, I think a lot of my journey also is similar. I started Bharatanatyam when I was 9, so a little later than people usually start, and it was because I asked my parents to put me in the class. So I went to the class, also hated it at the beginning, because
Even though you
especially for a
asked for
younger
it.
kid, yes, even after I asked for it, I was like, oh, should I have asked for this? Because it starts off very rigid, right? And then only later do you get into more creative pieces and starting to enjoy it. I think that's something that pretty much every classical dancer can relate to. I don't think anyone will say that they immediately loved it and loved it forever. You really grow into loving it. I also did my Arangetram in 2021. It was I think a huge defining factor in my dance journey, really coming to love it and appreciate it more regarding the history, the pieces I was doing, a lot of them being ones that I had done for many years before, but when you revisit them over your Arangetram, I think you find a deeper appreciation for their meaning. And then as for Moksha, I had a lot of people from my dance school on the team in previous years. And I knew, like, when I was coming to UMD, I immediately was like, I'm at least trying out for this team. And again, Moksha has been such a huge defining piece of my college career. And I think it's definitely helped me grow as a dancer, as a choreographer, and as captain, I think also as like a mentor and a teacher.
Yeah. So what I've heard is that there's a bunch of like stages of evolution for dance. As a kid, it's more just like kind of not responsibility, but it's just like something you're forced to do with the benefit of like maybe this is something that will work out, and then eventually you do get to learn more about exactly what does this movement mean. Instead of just a dance or like a set of like just physical exercise, it's more about just like creative expression and a creative outlet that gets transformed into, I guess, like UMD Moksha is a really, I guess, your ways is of like being able to, for you to step into that role of not just being a dancer, but being a person who's actually creating a set together with a team.
I think also just to add something that Darshini mentioned that a lot of people from her dance school were on Moksha, and that's something that she had in the back of her mind when auditioning and wanting to be on the team. When I got to college, originally it was pretty against the idea of joining a dance team because I thought, oh my gosh, I've heard so many horror stories. I have just heard so much about dance teams, and I don't want to like join a team and like get have to like commit my entire life to it. And well, but I had all these like I had heard so much about dance teams and horror stories and toxic cultures and things like that that I was originally really not intending to even audition. And what eventually convinced me is that were like people from my dance school who had also been on Moksha and loved it. um and now it's funny to reflect on that and be on the other side of it because it changed a lot for me.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask about is that obviously in this different stages of evolution, I think UMD Moksha has this. If we were to turn around to show dance is liberation, is it? It's on the sweatshirt, right? Our crew neck, dance is liberation. And I was wondering what that meant for you guys being on UMD Moksha, and what does that mean for your team in terms of classical dance too, or just dance in general, not in terms of classical dance.
So, for anyone who doesn't know, moksha means attaining liberation from the Hindu cycle of birth and rebirth. That is like essentially the foundation of Hinduism. And so I think that's how the Dances Liberation slogan came along, which I think is really clever, whoever had come up with that. And I guess for what it means for me, it means to be in a space where I'm doing what I love, dancing with the people that I love, and just being able to let anything else that I'm stressed about or thinking about really melt away and be present in what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think um really echoing what Darshini said, I think it's always interesting to think about kind of broader meaning of like thinking about the idea of liberation and what that means. I think mostly I think about it kind of as Darshini said on a more personal level, but I think it's also very interesting to think about dance as the art form like as a tool for community and kind of that broader idea of like community and liberation that can come from dance.
Yeah, what I'm hearing with that is dance is a means of expression, and being able to express different stories, being able to express different narratives. It's not just, for me, a big part of it is movement, feeling like myself, being able to know my body, but at the same time, it's the other aspect of what am I conveying through my own body and being able to create art, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so Darshini talked about one thing about being able to be present during practices and on the team. But I was wondering if you guys have created a strong culture for that to happen. At least that's what I think, because when the UMD Moksha takeovers, every single person said Moksha is a place for me to just turn off my mind and be able to be present in dance. And that's really difficult. Like, at least for me on a DDN team, we had practices 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. Of course, we'd always be thinking about school during practice, but at the same time, I even feel like other teams, like dance is a big commitment in terms of like even if it's just 10 hours per week, school is there too. So how did you guys think that culture was just created happens that like as classical dancers, you guys are already like really more present, or just like your guys' team was able to like create that type of culture where you wanted all of you guys to be together for those 3 hours and outside that, and it's a break for everyone.
Um, Darshini, do you want to start off and I'll add?
Sure. I think I'll start by saying we're really lucky that this culture existed before we came on. I think this is the culmination of work of captains and teams before us. So it didn't feel very new for us to have that kind of space. I think what helps is that the work that we do on our team is so collaborative. Like, you really need everyone's input to get things done, and it's something that we really value. And Another thing regarding dance, I think especially when we are actively like running a piece, it is, in my opinion, impossible to be able to think about anything else and do the step correctly and deliver the expression correctly. And I think dancing just really hones in on your focus in that way. And again, really puts you in the present moment. As for creating that kind of culture, I think it also depends on the people who are on the team, how well everyone works together. And again, I think it just goes back to really emphasizing that everyone's role is valued, like everyone's voice is very valued. And when people feel that way, when people feel respected on their team, like they will want to continue to contribute. And that in turn makes them feel like a valuable, respected member of the team, not just for themselves, but everyone else. So it's like this circular event, I think.
Yeah, and I think also, especially what Darshini said about like you really do have to focus and you kind of have to be present for those 2, 3 hours, however long the practice is. Honestly, I feel like for me, it was a lot of the reverse where I was just like thinking about dance or thinking about the team or things that were going on outside of practice versus like thinking about school.
I wanted to add more to that part about dance being present, puts you in the present moment. I was wondering what that feels like for you guys when you dance, because at least for me, it's really, really hard to be present when I dance because I'm thinking about, are my facials good? Are my expressions good? Am I performing this step properly? What's the next step? All of these different things, and I can never be fully present in the moment. And like I definitely felt after graduating from the DDN circuit, I've been more attuned to that. Of just like, how about let's just feel the movement instead of actually thinking about that movement. And I was wondering if you guys had any insights on like what that feels like for you about being able to be present during dance.
I feel like those things that you mentioned, like thinking about, oh, what's the next step? Or am I doing this emotion? Am I portraying this properly? Are my arms sharp enough? Am I like holding out my fingers? Is my mudra correct? I feel like all of those things are kind of part of being present to me, whether they're kind of articulated like that as that kind of like stream of consciousness words in your mind, or if it's just like thinking about how it feels in your body. I feel like that's still kind of part of being present. And then getting to what you said, Jaish, about eventually feeling like you can just kind of do the movement. We do so many runs and we drill so much, especially when we get into competition season or before performances. At some point, you just do so many repetitions that it's just kind of there. And I think that's something also maybe different about the classical circuit is that I know like a lot of people in the classical circuit, as you said, have been doing like classical for many, many years. So it doesn't have to be as much of a conscious thought of like, am I sitting in Irmandy? Am I holding my arms out straight? Versus maybe in other like DDN circuits, like if people are newer to dancing that kind of dance style, they might have to think about it more consciously.
Did you want to add anything?
Not
No? Okay.
really.
Okay, so Darshini, you mentioned about the aspect about like, being able to know that people are respected and their input is valued. And that's what Abhi and I were talking about last week about like creating opportunities for people to show up and be present and be able to have an impact and have an influence. I've seen that like your team does a really good job of that, where everyone can and is willing to be giving up critiques. When I say good origins, like everyone was critiquing each other, everyone was like there, knowing that they have an influence and impact on how the team functions at the end of the day. And that's, in my opinion, really hard to create because it's really hard for everyone to be involved. It's really hard for everyone's voice to always be heard and an impact to be valued. So I was wondering, like, how do you, and there's also like everyone participates in creating choreo, and then also a significant portion of people also have leads or like mini leads too. So is that something you've thought about actively? This is something we want to continue having under control all the time. And how did that start? What impact do you think it creates? This is a 10, 20-minute conversation. It doesn't have to be a 1 minute response.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
Apurva, do you want to start actually?
I think first, it's just that a lot of it is just everyone on the team being willing to show up and being willing to be present and share their ideas. And that takes a long time to get comfortable with. Like when you mentioned that at Origins, that was at the end of the season, but it definitely does not look like that at the beginning of the year with people being so freely sharing their ideas. Like it does take work and it does take practice being uncomfortable. For example, critiquing people or giving feedback to people who are older than you. That feels really strange at first, or building the confidence to share an idea or to build on someone else's idea. It does take conscious effort and practice and a lot of reminders from everyone on the team to each other, really. Also, I wanted to say that about the choreo piece and about building off of each other. I think Moksha is a team that's been around for a long time to compared to some other teams in the circuit. And so that's definitely like something that's been around longer than I was on the team, longer than Darshini was on the team. So that's something that I feel has been encouraged for a while of choreoing together and encouraging. And it's looked like we've used different methods even over the few years that the two of us have been on the team. But I think emphasizing how much we want people to collaborate has really been important, and recognizing that everybody comes, even within our team, is and has been mostly Bharatanatyam dancers, but recognizing that everyone still comes with a different style and different teaching and all of that. Like it's a really fun process and it's really creative to bring all of that together. So I think just having it be fun and the collaboration is a big part of making it fun and making it enjoyable. So I think that's been around for a while and will hopefully continue to be.
I wanted to like expand upon that a little, and it's totally fine if we go off that tangent because I think a lot of new teams in DDN usually have that where everyone's involved in the choreo and creative process, but then as time goes on, the leadership structure goes up in terms of the first years become the third years, fourth years. They don't necessarily verbalize or reciprocate that initial thing of everyone should be involved, everyone can create choreo. So for you guys, how does that look like in terms of a practice or like in your season? How does that happen where you're able to make sure that everyone does have the ability to say, hey, I want to see this type of choreo and this is what I think could be included? Because even coming in as a dancer, even if it's classical and everyone knows how to do it, you don't come in with that idea of, oh, I've choreoed this choreo for all your time you're growing up. When you're entering university, that's probably the first time you're actually like, oh, this is something I could potentially do.
Yeah, for a lot of people, definitely for a lot of
No.
college is definitely, it was for me like my first time choreographing, even like really thinking about choreographing, to be honest. One thing that Moksha has done, again, it's looked different over the years, but this is something that has been done for a while, is that aside from our competition piece, we also usually do a piece in the fall. When I was captain and the first year that Darshini and I were on the team, this looked like a Pushpanjali. Um, and so it's a more kind of traditional, like familiar dance for a lot of people. And so we choreograph the dance over the summer except for a little segment, usually a little segment that we save and say, okay, when we get new people on the team, we're going to have them choreo this little part. So, as an introduction to choreographing for a dance that is a little bit more traditional, maybe a little bit more in people's wheelhouse. And a lot of times that's something that's emphasized from the fall semester, like from the beginning, is teaching the new additions on the team, teaching them what we had choreographed over the summer. And once we teach them all of this new choreography, then being like, and we have this little section for you that we want you to try choreographing. So that comes to mind as a specific, very intentional way of pulling people into that practice of learning how to choreo and learning how to come up with that and work together on it.
I'm sure that's an amazing way to encourage ideas. And when you said that, it really stuck with me because when I was in Raftar, I felt like I, as a freshman, struggled to get my ideas out there. And I just felt like it wasn't that encouraged just because there was a really clear leadership structure, right? So, with having that one piece, you need to have your freshmen kind of already excited to put their ideas out and already ready to collaborate. I feel like there's a missing piece there. What else do you do to every day at practice being like, hey, we really want to hear what you're thinking about, what you want to say, your artistic vision, right? How do you guys do that?
So I think just to give a little bit of structure to what our schedule looks like in a comp season, like Apurva mentioned, all of the returning members will choreograph that Pushpanjali over the summer. In the fall, we get our noobs in September, so maybe like September to October is when we're teaching that Pushpanjali, minus the small section. While we're teaching it, they already recognize that this is something that we've all choreoed. I think as we teach it too, we don't actually know what the choreography looks like and if it looks good until we all do it together. And so I think perhaps in that process, someone will say, I think this is too fast, or I don't think this is really working here. Can we change it to something else? And our noobs see that and they pick up on that. And I think they pick up on a lot more than I realized before. So they see that. And then as we give them that segment, it's not like we just give it to them. We coach them through, okay, what kind of beats are we hearing? Is there a certain step that maybe we've done too much and don't want to do at all again? So that's like where it starts. I think the bulk of getting the team more involved really comes with our competition piece. And Apurva said we've definitely tried different things in terms of getting everyone involved. For example, for me, I remember when we started off choreoing our comp piece, I was like, okay, this is our music, this is the scene, the vibes, let's come up with something. And when we did that as a big group, I think it was hard, especially because our team, like half of it was new people. At first, a lot of the voices like giving ideas were the returners. And my co and I were like, oh, like this is not working here. Like we really want to hear the noobs come up with their ideas because essentially dance is taking music and giving it like a visual form. And so even though we're all hearing the same thing, like everyone sees it differently. And that's just so freaking cool. And when you do that, when you give people the room to do that, you come up with choreo that is just like so much cooler. We later found out that when we split people off into groups, if we had like a minute for a scene and giving people like 15 seconds, we often paired like two new people with a returner just so that there was someone who could be that kind of guiding voice. Again, just emphasizing it's not though we take every single idea that comes. We do, especially as captains, have to evaluate what works and what doesn't. Returners know certain things need to look standardized and everyone needs to be able to do them the exact same way. And so sometimes we'll have to veto an idea. And it takes time for freshmen to get comfortable with that. And when they see everyone doing it and not just their captains doing it, I think it feels more okay. Like this is a space where I can give my ideas. And even if all of them are not accepted, I can find some things that do work and just take it in a sportive manner.
That's really cool, actually. So y'all like choreograph in the open, like you get into practice and you're like, all right, let's choreograph together. I feel like that sounds like just listening to it sounds like a really long process though.
Apurva, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, definitely. It
Wait,
is
wait.
hard.
Okay,
Sorry,
back
I
to
don't think I
what you're
can.
saying. No, we're all good.
Yeah, about choreo
About the
time.
long process.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think especially when as captain trying to schedule or plan out, okay, during this week, we want to focus on this. Me and my co captain did this, trying to plan out just a rough schedule of when you want to do things based on different audition video deadlines, or we know we have this show coming up. Choreo taking a while, definitely throw the wrench in things sometimes, but at the same time, that's also what leads us to try different methods of choreo. Like how Darshini said, splitting up into different groups, or sometimes even like splitting up into multiple groups to come up with different ideas for the same scene, and then saying, oh, I really liked this element from this group, and I really like that element from this group, and pulling it together. So we do try a lot of different ways to choreograph to get around how long it does take. But I think even though it can take a while, the value of everyone feeling invested and feeling like they see themselves and their style and their vision of the music and of the story in the piece, that is most important in that choreo process to me. It's worth it.
Dude, that's amazing because I feel like it's gonna be really stressful at the start because you're like you don't know if the schedule's gonna work out. I feel like that's probably the biggest stressful part, right? I bet it pays off when you're doing AVs and like everyone's invested and they're like, okay, let's do it. That's my part of my soul is in that piece. I'm gonna make sure it's gonna look amazing. Is that how it Dude, that's amazing. That's beautiful, dude. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I think the piece, especially by the end of comp season, it becomes
Mhm.
everyone's baby. And we're always so sad by the time we do it for the last time on stage because everyone invested so much time and so much thinking into making it happen. And like Apurva was saying, sometimes it doesn't always work out. Like I know this past season, I spent a lot of my winter break choreoing things just because the timeline didn't quite work out. But even then, I think there are some things that are non-negotiable for us, and one of them being like we want everyone's opinion to be in our piece and everyone like ideas as well. And so an example for me at least with that is that we had this big war scene in our piece last year, and even though it was going to require so much time to choreo by the time we came back in the spring, I was adamant that the group gets to do it together because it's the big climax that everyone is really looking forward to. And so I thought we will figure out a way to make it work somehow, but everyone is going to get to contribute to this. But yeah, I think a lot of the way that Apurva and I have captained comes from a value based system.
I'm really glad you said that because I'm really glad Nitish brought up that it's hard because I feel like a lot of the sustainability things, the hardest things can make your lives easier. And you're talking about like the value-based system, but also that's it part. Everyone's invested, everyone's here to make a story, and everyone's here always invested. And you don't have to punch it later, be like, come on guys, we gotta push and drag everyone along. Like you said, it's everyone's babies. So everyone's there, everyone's present, everyone's always trying to make an impact. So like if it's stressful in the beginning, that's fine. What you said was true. It's stressful, but hopefully it will lead to better results, like a better outcome for us based on our value system and what we care about.
Dude, also, you said at the end of the piece, at like the end of the year, that everyone's so sad to see the piece go, right? That is completely opposite to what we experience, which is I did Superhero, the song Superhero, like 2 years ago. I don't know if you remember it. We heard that song everywhere, and we were sick. And usually, how it is for us, I love my team. I love my team, and obviously, there's differences with the way that things are led. But at the end, it was just like, I'm so glad that I'm done dancing. And that's crazy how it's so different for y'all. Does everyone feel the same way on the team?
Had that
But
experience with it.
it's
But I
funny
think
because we all laugh about it. We finish the year and we're like, dude, that piece, I hated that piece.
mm,
And everyone just laughs about it, which is sad in terms of the artistic part of me. Um, but it takes a lot to come out of that year and be like, you know what? I'm so sad to see that piece go.
yeah, it's an interesting point, and it just brings to mind that it's funny because during the fall show this year, Moksha organized a fall show and a showcase, and the current captains let me, my other co-captain, and Darshini perform a short piece. We performed our Pushpanjali from our first year on the team. Just because we felt nostalgic for it, we wanted to revisit it, we wanted it to feel like exciting. And that was probably the last time I will ever perform that dance. But it was happy and nostalgic to get to do that with them.
Yeah, I think overall it just depends on the piece. I think it's more of realizing that journey with the piece has come to an end. Like, you're not going to ever do it again, and you're not ever going to make changes to it again. And of course, there are certain scenes that everyone has mixed feelings about, like, especially our climax. That was hard. I don't think any of us are really particular about pushing ourselves and performing that again. Sometimes we'll hear music and be like, oh my gosh, I don't want to hear that again for a while. But I think I can't speak for the whole team, but I do personally feel some level of nostalgia for the three pieces that I have been lucky to be a part of.
I think that's an interesting thing that you mentioned of saying that you're never going to revisit the choreo and make changes because so much of competition season is making changes to the piece based on judges' feedback, based on how the team feels about certain things. At least for me, thinking about the piece that we worked on when I was captain, the Alzheimer set so much of that choreo from the beginning of competition season to the end. One major part of it was that at Origins, we performed a completely different ending to the story than we had ever done before. So the last competition, when we qualified to Origins, within that time, we found music, choreographed, standardized practice, like a completely different ending to perform that. and have that be the last thing. It was a strange feeling at the end to be like, wow, we have done so many different versions of this piece, and there are so many more versions that we could do of this piece that just will not happen because we're done with it. There always is that feeling of relief after comp season. It's a long, intense semester. So definitely there are those feelings that you said, the relief and the okay, we are done with this. That was a long run and we're done with this. But also the nostalgia of finishing your time with that story and finishing your time getting to be really creative and explore the different avenues within that story. That also feels really bittersweet.
I think part of it, of making it more exciting and just engaging everyone. I know I'm connecting it back to 20 minutes ago, but it's like it seems like y'all changed the choreo a lot, like small changes and big changes. I think that's probably what makes it a lot more engaging and just fun to come back and miss the dance. Because I feel like with DN at least, it's once you hit that kind of piece, like you made the piece, it's small changes like, oh, move your arm like this instead of like that, or just small changes, and we never really go away from the choreo. We would never change the storyline. So I think that's a big part of how y'all are so connected with the dance is that y'all change it just so you can make it more engaging and reconnect with the dance and the piece and the team. Yeah. Y'all agree with that? What do you
No,
think?
I'm just trying to think of a useful addition on that.
I was just like summing it up, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
That just seemed like what that's the first thing I thought. I was like, I'll change that a lot. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. And also I definitely agree and also don't want to discount that like the changing it does take a lot of like work, a lot of brain power, a lot of I think it also brings up like some challenges too. Like that's kind of part of the process of as captain taking judges' feedback, bringing that to the team and then figuring out how to change things. It's hard, like getting critiques and changing things that you have worked on for so long. It's hard on like kind of the emotional level that we were talking about earlier, where it's like it's frustrating to choreo something and then be told it doesn't work. But then also it's really just frustrating on a physical level to have to like think of new ideas and relearn new things. I just wanted to bring that up because I don't want to ignore that side of it. It is a lot of work and it is a very frustrating process a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I think the reason why we do a lot of changes has to do with the fact that the classical teams, we don't get a voiceover to explain our piece. We don't get props to make things super obvious. And so a lot of the judges' feedback we get is how can we make what we're saying clear, right? Because we don't have those other tools. Like we just have our mudras and our expressions. So I think a lot of the changes that we do is just instead of having a step that looks cool here, can we have that step mean something? Like instead of having an interesting looking formation, can that formation mean something? And so I think as the season progresses, we just try to add a lot more meaning to everything that we're doing in the piece. And so I think that is where a lot of the new choreo changes come from.
I wanted to step back 20 minutes ago about two things I wanted to talk about. One can be short, and the second one is pretty long. The first one was like, it seems like you guys teach how to think about choreo. Like you basically brought up musicality. This is the beats you're looking out for, and this is how you could think about certain steps. And that's something I never learned. I never thought to think about till like my fourth year, or even after I graduated from dance. And I think that's something that's really interesting in terms of teaching how to choreo. It's not just teaching to dance, but teaching how to choreo, and that's the process you go through. And then the second thing I wanted to learn more about also is how do you enable critiques and how do you enable people to bring up ideas, but also not shoot them down. But if I brought up idea and I'm really excited about it, but I realize it doesn't work, how do you make sure that this is still a process where everyone's valued and they know that they're still valued even if that idea is still not adopted?
You go ahead, Darshini.
I guess starting with the second one, we try to give everything a shot. Like it doesn't hurt to at least try something, especially because after we try it, we can figure out if it can be modified in some way, or someone can think, oh, someone else will come up with a different idea that's similar that maybe works better. So I think it's important just to give things a shot, like even if immediately, like as captain, we might think, oh, this might not work, especially if we feel that someone is excited about the idea. Like it costs us nothing to at least give it a try. And it means a lot to the dancer and then also ultimately us, because we might have a certain image of what something looks like in our head and we actually see it and we're like, that's exactly what we needed. So everything is also always worth a try, I think.
Yeah, tagging onto that, I think that was definitely something I learned a lot about during my captaincy. There are a lot of times where we would get into talking about our ideas, and then eventually it would just be like, okay, we need to, even if you don't have this choreo idea fully fleshed out, can you block this out for me? Can you tell me more and show me more about what you're thinking? And kind of as Darshini said, as captain, even if you don't think it's going to work out or it's something you disagree with, just being willing to be like, okay, let's see how this works. Or also the idea of, yeah, maybe I'm not understanding or I have a different vision and they have something new to show me. You should show it. And I
And
don't know.
how do you verbalize? Oh, how do you verbalize the second part if certain ideas don't work? Of being able to tell someone this idea doesn't work for these reasons, or do you just say, do you verbalize all of that, or do you just say, I don't think that's gonna work?
It depends a lot on the context, a lot on the timeline, what specific scene, what specific kind of scene you're trying to choreo. For me personally, I feel like I usually like to give a reason for why I might like not want to use someone's idea or want to redirect their idea of being like, oh, we're doing a lot of that kind of step already. Can we think of something that instead of our arms moving in this way, can we think of something else where they move in this way instead because we've already done a lot of that first kind of movement? Or something like, I don't know, Darshini, if you have another example of some a redirection that comes up often.
I think sometimes it just makes sense for us to say this is going to be tough to standardize. And I think as the season goes on and like we show examples of our past pieces and things like that, and just emphasize the need for everyone to look the same. Like sometimes we'll say, oh, I think it'll be really hard to get everyone to look the same when we do this. And I think especially noobs don't understand that at the beginning. Like I definitely didn't understand that. But as time goes on, I think they understand that being a big reason. And then Apurva said, like just suggesting ways that we can change it, like saying, I like this part, but can we make it a little more this, a little more that? I know at that like beginning of the season, I emphasized a lot that everyone is coming in with so much experience, and I think that's what makes the classical teams like a little almost intimidating to captain, really, because a lot of these girls have many more years than I do, exposure to performances and having performed on big stages and things like that. So I've always emphasized, especially since a lot of them have just come off their outingage, we have individually really learned how to shine, and now we need to figure out how to combine all of our strengths and make us shine as a team. And sometimes that looks like compromising on certain things. But when we approach it from that mindset, like we're going to end up with a better product. So I think just especially in the beginning, like reiterating that it is nothing personal at all. And then I think over time, they also begin to understand that.
I was just asking if you could repeat the first question that you had said.
Oh, it seems like you guys think intentionally about teaching how to choreo instead of just teaching how to dance. You explain musicality, but there's probably just more parts than just the musicality portion. Is that true? It could just be a
Um,
yes or no answer.
I think it's interesting because our response to a lot of these questions varies a lot. One thing that Indian classical dance is often taught alongside classical music. Personally, I was not trained in classical music, but a lot of the times people on the team are, or there are a couple people who are. So it's always interesting the dynamic of the different ways that people understand the music and understand the beat or the thalam and the vibe of the music. That does not always come from the captains being the people to explain the beat or explain the rhythm. That's something else that Darshini touched on, where a lot of people or everyone comes with different experiences and different backgrounds to explain different things. It was probably the Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Okay, she says her laptop gave up.
That sounds really sad. Wow. Okay. I'm assuming she'll join back in like a few
Yeah.
minutes, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, Jay, you're muted.
I did want to ask, Apurva, you could get started about what prompted that team. How in the season did you think about that? And obviously, like, how do you guys even create a set in the team? Do you think about formations first, choreo first? How does the whole? I understand there's a whole variety. That's been a prompt team in our whole discussion, but
Yes.
I just wanted to get a more clearer picture of like how that whole set came together.
Yeah, I want to about the specifics of the Alzheimer's set, I want to wait for Darshini to get back
Okay.
because that's one that actually stemmed from an idea that she shared about that.
Awkward.
But
Guess
generally,
we'll have to
we
wait.
have for coming up with our theme and our comp piece, generally we first come up with we make a Google Doc and everybody throws ideas at the wall, sees what sticks. Honestly, it starts as a long Google Doc.
Hi. I
Um
think my laptop is reaching the end of her career.
We're talking about theme creation. I was introducing the general structure of how we do comp piece stuff, and then if you want to get into the Alzheimer's set. Generally, part of it is creating a Google Doc, people drawing on people like everybody from the team putting ideas on it if they have them. A lot of them start out really general, of being like, oh, I just have a topic, but not a storyline. So sometimes people just put topics on there. Sometimes it is like a specific story, or, oh, I had this idea of a scene in my head. So it'll be like a specific scene that you could build an additional storyline around it. We also always refer back to like old theme docs from past uh, years of the team. That's always interesting, especially when they're older than people you know who've been on the team. It's their ideas from people who you personally just don't know. That's always interesting to see what people were thinking about. And a lot of the times that you'll see the same theme on multiple documents through the years get fleshed out in different ways or get fleshed out a little bit more. Like it really is that iterative process over years sometimes, which is interesting. And then once we have a lot of ideas, we take time in multiple instances of being like, okay, everyone, now we have a bunch of topics. Can everyone, under the themes that you put some ideas for specific scenes? Okay, now that we have specific scenes and we have narrowed it down a little more, let's put some ideas. If you have any, like, what would be the climax of this piece? What would be like some really interesting formations of this piece? So, like, slowly in each step, getting a little bit more into the nitty gritty of each, narrowing it down a little bit more, voting, critiquing, talking, discussing. So that's how the general process goes. Darshini, do you want to talk about our Alzheimer's piece specifically?
Sure. So the Alzheimer's piece was actually something that some alum many years ago had suggested, and it was one of those old theme docs. And I was the one who had read it. And recently I had also read this book called Still Alice. Very good read. I would highly encourage anyone to read it. It is the fictional story of a Harvard professor who was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. So I really thought that we could use that book as a foundation for a potential piece. A lot of scenes from that piece we did lift directly from the book and just changed it here and there. Instead of being a college professor, like our character was a dance teacher. And she has like multiple family members. We had cut it down to a husband and a daughter. So just simplifying the piece in that way. The idea of Alzheimer's and dementia in general, like it was something that was very meaningful to a lot of our team members. I think, especially within our own team, we had multiple people who had family with Alzheimer's or dementia. And I think if you don't know someone personally, you definitely do know someone who has family with that condition. So when we started off that piece, I think, at least for me personally, I really saw it as just a story that I wanted to tell and not necessarily like a competition piece because the storyline just felt so much more than something that we were going to perform at a competition in order to win points and win a trophy and things like that. In terms of how preparation for that went, again, a lot of reading specific scenes from the book and figuring out how we can translate that. For example, there's this very critical scene in the book where she's jogging near her home in her neighborhood, and she suddenly finds herself lost. Like she can't remember how to get home. And so we portrayed that in our piece where she's taking a familiar route from her dance class to her home, and all of a sudden she can't remember where she's going. And so we had the dancers point in different directions, representing her mind pointing her in different directions and confusing her. So that book really helped, I think. We did a lot of watching interviews, watching videos, reading articles, things like that, just anything that would really bring to light what the experience of an individual with Alzheimer's goes through rather than the perspective of a doctor or a caregiver, like really understanding what they go through with this disease. And also just recognizing that everyone's experience is different. And so, for that reason, we didn't specifically only want to stick to the book, even though that's what it was based on. And we tried to look into a lot of different stories and incorporate all of that. And that piece in particular, I think it became very important, like the Abhinaya workshops that we do, and just talking through what it means for us, what we think a character is going through at any given point. How can we really depict a topic that is so difficult even to explain in words, like solely through dance? And so I think that was a very special opportunity and special piece for all of us who were in it. Apurva, do you want to add anything?
No, you really covered everything. I
I
will say there is also a movie based on the book that was also out. Some of us who were available got together and watched the movie one night. A bunch of us, I don't remember when it happened, but I myself, we read the book from start to finish and picked out specific scenes that we thought were really poignant, like all this that Darshini already mentioned.
Yeah, and ultimately our focus was the story, not necessarily the competition part. I remember, I think it was when we were at Chuck Day, we had gotten a message from someone on Instagram, and she was talking about how the story directly spoke to her because she had grandparents with Alzheimer's. That meant so much to me because ultimately our purpose is to connect with our audience. And even like that piece did end up doing well over the that season, but even if it hadn't, that one message would have been enough for me. That is all I need to know that it touched someone. More importantly, that someone felt like this is accurate to what I went through and what my family went through, because we want to honor that story. And so that's why so much thought went through it, so people can feel heard and feel connected to it.
Yeah, I think one of the most special feelings and experiences for me was when we performed when I was one of the captains. The piece overall was so much. There's so much there to talk about with it. But one thing was that at Origins, we didn't place. And we had throughout the season a lot of positive feedback. That was definitely hard at the end of the season. Like, you do all this work and we didn't place. The next year at Origins, the following year, I was I attended, but not on the team, just as a liaison. Even a whole year later, there were two people who I met at Origins the following year who, when they met me, they found out I was on Moksha, worked on this piece and performed and everything. Even one year later, they said to me, "Oh, that was really special to me." They brought that up and told me how much it touched them. That almost round full circle feeling was so special. I still think about it. And I'm still in contact with one of the people I met who told me this. It's on my mind often.
to tell a story through a dance on stage, through a college competition. That is, I haven't really heard that before. In DDN, we have a lot of different themes, and usually it's entertainment, which is what I had and I've seen mostly. And usually the more deep, hard-hitting, emotional pieces slash themes don't really get as much traction for the message. It's usually for the gimmicks or whatever. That's just different from what I've experienced.
Adding on to that, I think we both were just blown away by you saying that because I think that's what I want to have within my dance experience of just like it is a production, but it's a production in terms of story. And this is what I want to connect to my audience because I think one of my friends slash captain of EKA, like best friends, he said if you didn't have competition, if you didn't have placings, would you still dance? And what type of story do you want to tell to the audience? I was like, yeah, of course. I feel like sometimes just like the placings and like just the competition sometimes takes away from that. What do we want to tell and what do we want to convey? Even if it's just sad, not a story such as Alzheimer's, which people have connected with for centuries, do we want people to feel, and what do we want people to take away from our story at the end of the day, other than just some hype factor? Something I think that would be beneficial for all of us to honestly think about more.
I think there's still so much value in even pieces that are just for entertainment. Like, you guys make people happy. You know how to work up a crowd. And that's so fun. We were both at TBN when we had competed with this Alzheimer's piece. And of course, we were at Motor City the Mall this past season and Chuck Bay Seville. And we were going crazy in our seats, like for all the fusion teams there. Like, it's just so much fun. It doesn't all have to be serious. I think just making people feel happy in itself is a big deal. In terms of the classical circuit, I can still remember UT Nritya Sangam had did a La La Land theme piece.
Exactly
Yeah,
what I
I
was
see
gonna
Apporva
say.
because it was like it lives in my head rent free because it was so good and so fun and just amazing. And that was a piece I really loved. And I think I cannot totally remember the team right now, so I won't suggest what team it was, but they had done a Rapunzel piece, Tangled,
Mhm.
and they fully came out with the Iron Pan and stuff like that, and that was so fun to watch too. I think it really took a lot of us back to our childhood and growing up with those stories and those movies, so I think there's still value to all of those stories as well.
I think this Jayesh was talking about this earlier. I'm sorry, were you gonna ask something, Jayesh?
No, you can go.
Okay, Jayesh was talking about this earlier where he was asking questions and really encouraged new ideas and have this different team culture, right? And y'all were just like, we don't know what to say. It differs, it's different. And I think it's this really core mindset change. And maybe that stems from the fact that y'all as captains, because the people who come into your team have so many years of experience, feel like you as a captain are just guiding the team instead of leading the team and really building the choreo and really making the team. You feel like you're just guiding the team. And I think that's why it's so hard for me at least to understand why it's so different for y'all. What do y'all think about that?
I feel like that what you said is how it felt for me as captain.
Hmm.
I think that was a good kind of summary.
Yeah, I guess it's just because with DDN, right? Usually the captain is someone who's been in the team for 2, 3 years and has the most experience. And so it's whatever he says goes because he has the most experience and he has the most knowledge. And even if you do give an idea, he's going to be the one who ultimately has like the word over it, just objectively because he has more knowledge. Whereas with y'all, I'm sure it's, wait, this person has 13 years of experience. I feel like it's a normal thing. And it's like, this is, everyone's 13 years experience, right? And even with having that theme and like having that deep message, it's since everyone has so much experience, everyone's in the team. I don't know how to put this into words, but I think y'all get it where it's this is not something that I'm participating in, this is something that I'm creating. And every single person feels that way, which is so different to what I've experienced. Yeah.
I will also say, like, just about your captaining point, like, both Darshini and I also had very, what I would call, like, non-traditional captaincies a little bit. My captain year, it was my second year on the team, which is not the normal. Me and my co-captain had been on the team a year longer than I had been, but it was when we were all online. So both of us had
Mm,
our sophomore years be the first year that we were like in person, traveling, competing. And then the next year we were captains. So it was like, I don't know, Darshini knows this. Like, I'm the first to say there were like, so I learned so much just by like trial by fire and trial by error and learn like lessons from errors and like learning along the way. And so I think in that sense, that also definitely contributes to that idea of I have so much to learn. Like knowing that I was like pretty inexperienced compared to people who were on the team since their freshman year and then captained as a senior. Me and my co-captain were both juniors at the time. A lot changed the year that we were captain, like rules around traveling and competing, rules around the circuit, but also just rules at our university surrounding like travel and funding and things were a lot different. So that was like just a lot to navigate and a lot to learn that we didn't have a lot of support from because nobody had ever had to do it before because of COVID. And then also Darshini, if you want to say more about this, but Darshini and her co-captain the next year were juniors, didn't have that traditional captain as a senior type of experience.
Yeah, I think everyone comes in with so much different experience. It's not like I actually know who has had the most experience. I just know that everyone has come in with a lot. It's not like we weigh someone's voice more because they've had that strictly dance experience. It's not like, oh, they have 13 years of experience, let's listen to them. You've made it onto this team, and so that means like your ideas are worth a lot. And in terms of like when you were saying like captain ultimately makes the shots, yeah, that is what a captain does, I think. And ultimately, as captain, you have to find that balance between having everyone's ideas kind of cook and everyone like come up with them, and ultimately saying, okay, like this is how we're gonna do it, because that is your role as a guide, and getting a competition piece together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like there are plenty of instances of, yes, have to make an executive decision about this. This is just how it's going to be. We might change it later. This is how it's going to be for right now. There are definitely still those instances, that vibe sometimes.
Mm.
But I'm gonna hop in and say but at the same time, I heard you guys try to as much as you can include everyone's voice and include everyone's narrative. It's not just you're not choosing it based on like your perception or your understanding of like what's right or wrong. It is based on that, but like you're basing it on a value system, like you're basing on a certain reasoning instead of just basing on if it's good or bad, just based on whoever gives it. Like you're trying to encapsulate everyone input and try to guide that somewhere moving forward. And so I wanted to move on to something else, and that this I don't know how to like perfectly phrase this question, so it might be a bad question, but like when I saw you guys in Origins, there was no stress in terms of placing, in terms of doing well. It was just like I'm here to have a good time, but also at the same time, it was that was there till show day, and then at show day you all were locked in, but not locked in a way where it was like I need a place, I need a place. It was more locked in. I really want to show an amazing performance today. I want to show the best performance and best narrative that people can connect with. I think when you said the Alzheimer part about I want to create some, even if it's not about placing, it's just about being able to say this message or story and have it connect with certain people. And I was wondering if that is your focus. Like when you go to a competition, what does your focus look at and what do you care most about?
Yeah, I can start that one off. I would agree. I think we really do focus on honoring all of the time and ideas that we put in throughout the season, and really just doing our best and uplifting each other so that everyone's doing their best. Because nobody except for my team is going to remember how we placed 5 years from now. I don't even know if my team is going to remember how we placed 5 years from now, but we will remember how we felt coming off that stage, the memories we made at that competition, the memories we made while we were working on the piece. Like that is what's going to stick with us. And ultimately, that's the thing that I think one should focus on. In terms of how we were at Origins, it was a tough season. We had funding fall through, costumes come in late. We've had people have to leave the team for reasons out of their control. Didn't get into as many competitions as we would have liked. Maybe didn't hit all the deadlines that my co-cap and I had set for ourselves as we would have liked. There are just like certain things that didn't work out the way that we had hoped they would. And eventually you learn to roll with the punches and take things as they come and be flexible. So I think at Origins in particular, we were just so happy to be there. We were so happy to be there. I was just glad we made it, glad that everyone was having a good time. Um,
Wait, even at Chuck Bay Siebel, I saw the same vibes. I was just like, you guys just being happy, you guys just being present and really enjoying that weekend and enjoying the ability to show your performance. And when you did need to lock in, it was more of just, okay, I want to make sure that whatever performance I show today is the best performance I can put out. I cried. I teared up. I'm not even lying. When you said that, I literally teared up right now. I was like, oh my God, that's so special. But yeah, that's just one thing. Was like, even if it wasn't Origins, like Track Day CY, I still said the same things, which is just being present, just being able to like enjoy that performance.
Dude, because with a lot of teams, you walk off stage and the people who've messed up, they cry after stage. And it's usually never, we did it. It's never like that. It's the people who are crying, people who messed up are crying, and everyone else just kind of, dude, it's over. Let's get through it. Everyone's just sad. And that's so different than what I've experienced. Yeah. I felt the same way. Like I was always like, it's a performance and the worst mess up I've had on stage was like the curtains, right? It broke on stage. Jayish you made fun of me for this. Um, it like broke on stage, and I was after stage like laughing about it, and I feel like everyone was like, dude, it's amazing that you're laughing about it. And I feel like if it was almost anyone else, they would have probably been crying about it or just been really sad about it. And that's how it is with a lot of DDN, you know.
Other than Chalka, Chalka's my favorite team. I'm having that. But yeah, Apurva, do you want to say the thing you said in the chat because it won't show up? I think that would be a
Oh,
good one-liner.
people are using the chat, dude.
Yeah, just what Darshini was saying, like, I don't know who's gonna remember this 5 years from now.
Dude,
Genuinely, I captained 2022 to 2023. And I think I remember the competitions we went to and the places that we got at each one, but genuinely, I am not 100% about it, like, even about what we placed at our own competitions. I remember the feeling, I remember like judges' feedback. I remember how it felt to come back to the team after that and get off stage, or the moment after Origins where like just the feeling of it and exiting the stage and just hugging everyone and saying, yeah, like this was it. Like I remember all of that. I genuinely could not tell you what we placed at everything. I would have to double check it.
yeah, me neither.
Something else I wanted to add on that discussion point was just like on everything that I saw. I'm a stand for UMD Moksha. I don't care what anyone else says.
A little.
Something else I saw was like at Check Day Seal and in Origins too. Any negative thing that happened, you guys like, okay, that's fine. Let's just move on. There are so many moments I think at Origins when there was tech time and I think I messed up or Veda messed up and you weren't able to see your videos in time. You're like, okay, let's just move on. And it felt very like a breath of fresh air for you guys to just take anything and move on and go in a stride with it instead of just harping on that negative moment. I was wondering if there's like any mentality shift for that, or just like how you guys take it.
Wait, I want to say, I feel like, okay, usually people change by seeing the opposite, right? When y'all were freshmen, was it the opposite where it was like everyone was just down in the dumps after the competition? It was like, dude, I messed up. And y'all were like, you know what? We need to change that. When we're captains, we need to change that. Is that where that came from?
It was not as conscious of thinking like that, but it does bring up like I have a very vivid memory of one of our competitions from the first year that we were on the team. And I have like just such a vivid memory. I think it was our second competition of the season. Um, and I remember getting off stage and our captain, and keep in mind, most of us on the team were new. This was our first competition season, all of that. Our captain was stressed out about a mistake that she had made on stage. She was really upset. She was apologizing. And we watched the video. One, we ended up placing. Two, we watched the video later and we were like, where was your mistake? Oh, okay. It even took us on the team a second to be like, wait, what happened? So I think having that in my head as like having that feel so intense and like that feeling of how intense it feels when you exit off stage, like that is very real. That you've given so much into this performance. And it's like it's perfectly natural and understandable to feel so intensely about mistakes that you made and just think about it and cry. Like all of that is so understandable and so natural. But like to have that memory in my head and then also the contrast of seeing it after and like the reality check of what it actually was. I think that's always in the back of my mind after a performance. I don't want to focus on the regrets that I have on stage. I want to focus on my time with my friends and being present and enjoying this experience that we have together because it is so fleeting. And I think that part of it is something conscious that I had personally. The other part, maybe not as conscious.
Darshini, do you want to add anything to like the positivity that you have throughout comping?
Sure, I guess The thing is that like the week leading up to comp, like our hell week, like I'm absolutely up there and saying, like, we gotta fix this. I've said this one already, but everyone just remember. I am sure I come off as harsh that week leading up to it. But by the time you're at competition, like all of the hard work has been done. What's left is just for everyone to enjoy the reason why they joined this team, which is to be able to travel, to meet other teams, to compete, to show off the work that you've done the whole semester, the whole year. And so I think by the time you're there, there's no real reason to take anything in a stressful manner. You made it. You just have to enjoy it now at this point. As a team, like with our liaisons, we appreciate that you guys sign away your entire weekend to hang out with us and help us out with everything. There's no real reason for us to feel any kind of frustration at you guys at any point. After tech time, my co and I are saying these corrections. I know this is last minute, but can you please pay attention to X, to Y, whatever. At the end of the day, comp day, you just want to flood your team with as much positivity and excitement as you can.
Wait, I'm curious. When y'all were on stage, like y'all, whichever competitions y'all had, what was like the worst mess up that happened?
Genuinely, I'm
I'm looking
struggling
at the
to
chat
think
now.
of something.
I can think back to things that I did, like maybe
Yeah.
didn't sit in Mundi in time or turned too fast or something, but
Hmm.
I don't remember anything that went wrong with the group.
I can
Sense.
definitely remember individual things,
Mhm.
individual mistakes, but
I guess y'all just
yeah,
forgot them?
forgot
Damn,
them or
dude.
in the grand scale of things.
Muted,
Yeah.
Jake.
That's so I need to stop. But add to that, being you guys' liaisons, what I saw more was just like, again, I think Apurva summarized it perfectly, and Darshini did too, which is I don't want to live a moment in regret. And you guys just have this so much more camaraderie and joyfulness once you exit stage. It's just, hey, we did it. You guys are hugging each other. You guys are so present. I took a lot of videos. I hope that was fine. But yeah, and it just felt like you guys were just cared so much. Moving on. You guys don't do post mixer practice, which is insane because I feel every single team does it. DDN, our classical. Do you want to give insights on why?
Yeah, I think this topic is actually super interesting. So, in our first year on the team, a majority of us were new. It was our first year. And we had one captain who had ever competed in person before, just one person out of the whole team who had ever had that in person experience before. And our first year on the team, even though in previous years Moksha had not done post mixing practice in general before either, that first year on our team, we did do practice, but we would do post mixer practice. So the next year, my co captain and I, we did keep it. We did do post mixer practice that second year too. A lot of it was, again, as I mentioned earlier, like us getting our feet underneath ourselves and trying to figure out how to do it. We were continuing what we knew. And I think that is a lot of the reason why post mixer practice is still a thing for a lot of people. You just repeat what you know and what you were taught. And I think that's definitely something that I wish I had thought about more critically when I was captain. But so that second year, we kept it and we did do post mixer practice. And a lot of it came down to that similar feeling of there's still, oh my gosh, there's still like a little tweak that we need to do, or we need to like do this run in this space together just to like feel more comfortable again, or like I don't even remember the specifics of it at that point, but we kept them because it was what we knew, and it was like that feeling of oh my gosh, we still don't feel like, especially in that first competition of the season, there's a lot of feeling like you haven't performed a whole lot as a team together yet, and so I feel like there's still that feeling of I don't know if panic is exactly the right word, but that kind of that high stress, that like a little bit of panic and not necessarily that trust in yourself and trust in your team to just keep doing what you've been doing and putting in, as Darshini said, like the hard work has already been done the rest of the week and the rest of the season before it. But Point being, our first 2 years on the team, we did keep post mixer practice.
Yeah, and again, like Apurva said, the idea of not having post mixer practice is not something new that my co and I came up with. We had been told our freshman year that typically Moksha does not do post mixer practice. And so we thought, okay, why not bring that back? Maybe beyond that. It's a really hard week. And especially after mixer, like everyone's on this high, like super excited for competition. It just made sense for us to have the team go back, relax, go to sleep with that happy feeling instead of running whatever recent corrections we've given them over and over again as I go to bed. And also, then we just go to sleep earlier. Well rested people are happy, and happy people perform well. Happy people are excited to be there doing the thing that they're doing. So that I think was really our reasoning for not doing post mixer practice, was just keeping everyone calm, collected, happy, and also just being efficient with our time over comp too.
I remember when I talked to you about it, you also said you don't think a lot of changes would happen the day before or the night before. And also, Poover mentioned trust within your team, though it's still going to be the better performance. Could you talk more about that aspect of it too?
I guess I should also add that it's not that I'm not giving any corrections after tech time. Of course, there are things that we find in tech time and have to point out. So I guess it's not that there are no changes happening at all, or there aren't any changes, but there are still corrections being given. But it just felt like one way that we could make the experience of being on a comp team and having like our Hell Week a little easier for everyone. So that's just one way that we figured that we would be able to do it. And like you said, like nothing drastic is going to happen overnight. If anything, a lot of the corrections that we give at tech time is just because we haven't done it in 2 days and we're on a new stage and everyone is getting used to it. So just being effective again with our time and our physical ability to run this thing multiple times.
And there's that trust component too, because at least for me, I am a full proponent of no post-mixer practice because I wake up at 5 a.m. for prod stuff, go to sleep at 1. It's just, I need to get an edge or I need to be able to improve. This can be the thing that makes or break our performance tomorrow, no matter what we do. So I need to do this to make sure that tomorrow we can place and tomorrow we can improve and do better. But I guess there's also that balance of trust and feeling, okay, we've done what we could. And it's just more about being able to be restful and getting that sleep and like just feeling like what you said, feeling happy. So I was just like wondering if you guys ever felt that tension of, oh, I should be doing this because this might help put us above and beyond, or is it like, or yeah, I'll end up there, and then you guys can take the discussion forward.
Yeah, I would say like there, especially our first competition, like we really grappled with whether we should do post mixer practice or not. For context, we usually try as much as possible to get our comp piece done before winter break, and UMD has like a 5 week long break. And so we come back and there's usually only 2, maybe 3 weeks before competition week. And so we try to get that done. That did not happen this season. I think we only got maybe 3.5 minutes of choreo done in an 8 minute piece. And so we were pretty terrified. It was a really hard 3 weeks as soon as we came back. And so my co and I were really thinking, because we've been so limited on time and have had to learn so much and standardize so much so quickly, should we have it? Ultimately, we thought, again, like I said before, nothing drastic is going to happen overnight. We also discussed with the team the fact that we really appreciate that everyone has been putting in more hours than we originally anticipated. I think that was a big thing for me, was that we were going to try to make our practices shorter, and just due to circumstance it didn't work out. And so this was one thing that we both felt like we could deliver on and that we had given our word on. Even if it was going to come with its potential risks, that was something that we were going to keep to, simply because we said that we would.
Yeah, and I think on that, just the note about winter break in 2020, our first competition was the weekend that we got back from break. So we had the semester started that Monday, but that week people came back to campus on Sunday. We had practice every single night that week. And then that first competition was that weekend. So I think that was also part of wanting to do post mixer practice, especially that time of being like, oh my God, we haven't seen each other in 6 weeks. We've only had 4 days together to put all of this back together and run this piece over and over again. We need this post mixer practice. It was that idea that just snowballed into keeping it in the rest of the competitions. Yeah. I don't know. Strange circumstances.
And post mixer practice, and then you said Darshani and Anjali not do it. What was your perspective on that?
It made me reflect on myself a lot and it made me wish that I had done the same thing. But it made me really happy for them because from the outside, I could see the difference in the energy levels from like the year before, or the years before when we had done post mixer practice and like the kind of effect that had on everybody at night afterwards and then in the morning. And just like the mindset during tech time, if they could get to sleep a couple hours earlier because they weren't doing runs, like that was great. Even if it was just 1 hour earlier that they weren't doing runs, I feel like I saw the difference in energy that it gave. I think I saw the value in how much it gave space to mentally prepare, not just like physically prepare, but also really to gear up and set expectations as a team for how the next day would go because competition days are long. You are up so early and you stay up so late and it is so physically intense and you're running around all these different places and you're trying to get ready. There is so much that goes on and having the night before just to have that little bit of breathing room and that little bit of time together to spend in quiet just sets the tone for the next day, I think, in a way that was really nice. And I definitely felt like I saw a difference.
I think I saw a difference in the mixer too, because at least my experience when I go into mixer, I know I have post mixer practice afterwards, so I'm not that present. But mixer and being able to interact with other teams, but being able to just enjoy that moment. But I feel like for you guys, especially at Origins, you guys are also on the dance floor trying to dance as much as possible. I didn't see that from the other teams as much. I was just really happy to see that you guys have the opportunity to just be there and have that memory and experience as a team together. Or am I completely capping? Okay, I'm completely capping then. I thought I heard one thing, person say, "Oh, we might have not slept right after immediately post mixer practice and had a debrief, talked for 1 to 2 hours."
And that
Yeah,
comes naturally, but if you can cut out the like hour to 2 hours of
yeah,
post mixer practice, it's still early, relatively.
yeah. And I think it's going to sleep being happy, and I think that creates such a difference in the quality of sleep you get. That's so interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Natisha, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was just laughing at the last thing you said because I came back and you're like, going to sleep happy is a crazy thing. We would have practices until 12 easily, especially because we were really stressed towards the end of the year. And that was, now that you say it, it was not good. It was not good for the sleep. It was, the mixer feeling just went away, dude. So, yeah, yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask about, which is a pretty hard-hitting topic, is just classical dance, and something we talked about on our TikTok before is that, like, classical dance isn't necessarily always appreciated as much in terms of just obviously sometimes there is different audiences in terms of, I don't expect people to come to classical dance with an appreciation for it because they've never grown up with it, they've never actually been able to interact with it in a meaningful way, that they know how to do it. I think that's something Origins helps with in terms of Alzheimer's story. And when I came to Origins, I was like, these stories I can actually understand much better in the older classical stories. And because I have that understanding now, I can understand the older classical stories better. So that's one topic of discussion about like how Origins and the classical circuit helps in terms of being able to promote classical. Also, maybe create some competition in terms of that. But also, I was wondering about like when you go to fusion comps and stuff like that, do you still feel like people are able to relate to your stories and understand those in a better way? Or do you see the difference in like classical in terms of classical versus Bhangra? Of course, Bhangra is hard hitting, more powerful sometimes. But also, classical, I think, has the capability to be that.
I think, Darshini, is there either question that you have a preference for?
I know you had a good answer to this one, so I want you to go ahead.
I have a lot of thoughts about that first part of the question about origins. I really love the classical circuit. I love that what you said, it brings so much exposure to classical dance. And I think it is amazing and inspiring to see what other teams come up with. It lets you see talent literally from across the country. It lets you see people come up with ideas that you've never thought of before. I like I don't know. I love as much as I loved choreoing and competing with my own team, a huge part of being in the circuit was getting to travel and see other pieces and feel inspired and feel so impressed and feel really immersed in other people's performances, which I think is always amazing and stunning. We even just earlier brought up a piece that had happened our first year in the circuit. All that stuff really sticks with you. And so I think it's brought a lot of amazing things, and I think it definitely has expanded and encouraged that reach of being able to come up with and tell different stories. I don't know that I ever would have thought of a piece on Alzheimer's. Like, I truly never would have thought about that having not been exposed to the circuit. I think also you touched on this a little bit, Jaish, like that is like a double-sided coin, and the other side of it is that at the end of the day, we are still performing for judges, and what it takes to advance in the circuit is scores. So as much as we say we're not performing just for points to advance in the circuit, you are. So that definitely influences the kind of stories you tell, how you tell them on a level from how you choreograph things, what kind of emotions you choreograph, even to bigger and broader general topics. Yeah, I think I've heard a lot of varying opinions on how people feel about telling different kinds of stories in the circuit. I know people who have expressed views that they don't like how people sometimes I've heard talking about social justice themes or things about Alzheimer's. That is gimmicky, or that's, oh, you're just trying to grab at people's emotions. I've heard the flip side of people wanting it to be more traditional or less filmy. I don't know. I've heard a lot of different opinions on that. So that will always be there in the circuit. I feel like I'm starting to ramble now. So I would love for someone else to jump in.
We also talked about the ability to enjoy a performance without understanding that it's a competitive performance. You want to talk more about that aspect?
Sure, I can start on
Darshini?
this, and then Darshini would love to hear your thoughts on this. Yeah, it's been something I've thought about, especially having graduated out of the circuit, but still being I graduated this year in May, so it's pretty recent. I think it's interesting the impact that the circuit has on my view of dance in general. For one, I feel very lucky that it's influenced me to continue dancing, and I don't know that I would have if not given the circuit. So even outside of Moksha, I still perform with my dance school, and I still talk to my guru regularly, and we're in contact. And I don't know what that relationship would have been like if I was not on Moksha during college. But also that means I love watching dance performances. I love, even if it's something as simple as like my school or another school's annual day and I'm seeing like little elementary schoolers perform, like even that still has its charm to it. But definitely something I've noticed is that having been in the circuit, it's really hard to watch dance performances and not have my competition brain on, whether that's towards myself or towards watching other people. And it's something I feel guilty about, especially towards other people. But like, I wish I were able to watch a performance and not have something in the back of my mind of being like, those hands could be sharper. Oh, what does that formation mean? I wish that wasn't on in my brain all the time. And then she was like, there are good things to it too, of still feeling in that competitive brain of I have like notes document of like songs I listen to where I'll have choreo like pop into my head or a formation pop into my head and I'll text someone on the team and be like, oh my gosh, I just had an idea that would be so funny for a TikTok of this or something like that, where it's like some kind of classical dance to some modern song. So in those ways, it's fun. But at the same time, I wish I could turn that part of my brain off sometimes.
Dude, I'm imagining like elementary school kids performing on a stage, and you're just sitting in the stage like sharper arms. 5 points off. Five
Not
points
nothing
off.
like that, I promise. It's really for myself.
I'm sure it's like going on in the back of your mind. Even when you're dancing, you're seeing yourself in the mirror, and you're like, "Oh shit, my arms aren't sharp." But you're just there to like enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
Do you guys still dance by yourself?
I think that's an interesting part of that transition out of college is I do still dance. I just had a performance with my dance school this past weekend. It's lovely. I love performing. I love dancing, but it is really hard and it was really strange to start practicing for that and feel out of practice. Even practicing like once a week for an hour feels like such a hurdle now compared to like when I used to meet at least 3 times a week with other people. And now even just 1 hour a week, 1 hour every other week feels like such a hurdle now. So I don't know. That transition has been
Why does
interesting.
it feel like a hurdle?
Adults,
Are we
sorry.
unlocking something like deep?
No, not like that. A lot of it just has to
Yeah.
do with it's very different to one of the best parts of being on the college dance team is your community and being so close to people and knowing that you will see these people multiple times a week and you are going to spend so many hours with them. It's just different to not have that after college until I don't know. For me, it feels honestly sometimes it feels a little strange not to dance with Darshini with other people from Moksha. So it's just different.
Yeah, I agree. I think after college and leaving a team, you spend most of your dance journey up until now has you start with your arabos and then you learn your pieces and then you become a senior dancer in your school and then you join a team and then you leave and you're like, what now? Like you're on your own trying to figure out a way that you can stay connected with dance. And there's just been such a clear path for you up until now that now you have to be the one finding performance opportunities and workshops and places to grow. And I think it's also different when you start dancing by yourself again because it's also the first time that you're left without a teacher or some kind of guide, right? Because you have a teacher the whole time you're in K through 12 and then you're at Engagement and then you come join a team and you have like other members to give you feedback and you have captains and then all of a sudden you're on your own. And so I think part of it is just finding the motivation to do that by yourself and just get comfortable with the new stage in that dance journey.
Me and Jaish were talking about something very similar to that actually the other day. Because Jaish just, I know you applied to be captain, and you're not on the team anymore. But now you're like really trying to find a different way to dance, a different way to connect with that part of your life, right? Talk about that.
What? This is a podcast about me. What do you mean?
Is that not how to do a podcast? Shoot.
I think I relate with that aspect. Dance was always dependent on an external factor. It's a competitive performance. It's something I'm going to show. Recently, I'm doing my own performance, and that's what's pushing me to grow as a person. I've also had to learn how I want to engage in dance. When I do perform, do I want it to be like, okay, I'm executing all these steps properly, or just want to experience my body and feel my movement more than I have ever before and enjoy my performance in the way I want to and dictate that more and more. It's just been interesting being like, there's no one watching except yourself, but that's the worst part because you're also your biggest critic. Just being able to manage that expectation to dance, you have to be your biggest cheerleader. I want to learn this. I want to explore something new. I just want to feel myself, and like I just want to feel my energy. I was trying to figure out how can I get better, or how do I want to explore dance.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. And then also it reminded me of even when just the opportunity that not just classical teams give, but a lot of any other kind of dance or artistic club or organization in college can give. At the end of the day, I think I feel like for a lot of people, I just hope that they continue dancing or continue pursuing something artistic. There are people where I'm like, oh, I know this like talented girl like from my dance school I know who's like coming to this school and I really hope she auditions and I really hope she joins Moksha or like I can say all of that and then if like they decide to do something else, like at the end of the day, I'm just happy that they are hopefully doing something that makes them happy, but also that something is still dance and that they can explore that in a different form. And I think that's something interesting, like Jayesh mentioned, or I guess that Nitesh mentioned for you after being on your dance team and now trying to find a different way to stay in the circuit or stay connected with this aspect of your life. But when I was on the team, like when we have people apply and if they don't get on the team, we're also like, and we also have other ways that you can stay in touch with dance, or like we have like our school hosts this competition. This would be really great for you to get involved with. Like they always need people who have a background in classical dance. Like that's always great. Or like Darshini, if you want to introduce the fall show that Rang Barse, if you want to talk a little bit more about that and creating that opportunity too.
Sure. The showcase that Apurva had mentioned earlier, we held it for the first time the season that I had captained, and we had called it Rang Barse. We had a couple of key pillars, I think one of them being that we wanted to get as many of the comp teams at UMD to perform at it as possible. We wanted it to be a charity showcase, and we wanted it to be open call to any other performers at UMD who wanted to participate. That came from my freshman year. I have a couple of friends who were thinking about trying out for Moksha, and then they didn't just because of the time commitment that it is. And I remember one of them distinctly telling me it's so hard to figure out a way to continue dancing in college. And so that really stuck with me. And so with that showcase, we wanted to create an opportunity for anyone who wanted to perform to be able to come and do
How does the turnout look for that competition?
for our home competition.
No, like the charity showcase, y'all said anyone can really come and perform, right?
It so did. It did. It took a lot of advertising, and we called it Rang Barse, a Desi palette
Hmm.
of performing arts. So we reached out to Nepali Student Association, like Bangladeshi Student Association, like all these different orgs. Just if you're interested, come participate. I can't remember how many people we ended up having perform. I want to say it was like anywhere between 8 to 12. We had a lot of last minute
Yeah.
changes in our lineup. And so, on the one hand, while it would have been nice to have more people participate, I think we all just recognized it was our first time trying out something new. At the very least, we got to say that we gave it a shot, and I was happy with the results.
Wait, so y'all made Rang Day Burse,
Rang Barse.
Rang Burse from the.
Yeah, just a fall showcase.
That's really hard to
Thought
set
would
up,
be
right?
fun.
It's fun to put together, but I feel like there must have been so much on the back end to just set it up, to just do the logistics.
Mhm.
Damn, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Rang
I
Burse.
would say it was tough to do that the first time around. Like, we had to apply for funding, book the place, advertise, help write MC scripts. Like you said, a lot of logistics went into it, but they did it again this year and they made it so much better. And I think the year after that, it'll be even better. And so it was just good to at least start something like that. And it had a lot of room for improvement, but that's what they accomplished this year, and hopefully they will in the future too. And it was fun. It was a fun performance. We got to see a lot of not just the other teams at UMD who we don't get to see their performances in person a lot. So this was the one opportunity where we got to do that and all appreciate each other's art.
Can I perform next year if I'm around the area?
You will have to ask whoever organizes it next year.
There's gonna be auditions next year. Oh
Oh,
no.
Darshini, I think when Apurva was talking about like, post origins part about like looking at people's dance and being able to think about it with a competitive mindset, it seemed like you had some thoughts going on. I was wondering if you wanted to add anything on to that.
I heard origins and then I didn't really hear anything after that.
For the when Apurva was talking about the origins competitive mindset that she had before, it seemed like you had some thoughts going on, but I don't know if you had the chance to talk about that. Did you want to add on anything, or is just Apurva summarized it pretty well?
I don't think I have anything to add.
My bad.
About kind of,
Okay.
I think I get attracted to like certain topics, and I'm like, wait, I want to hear more about that. I'm like really curious about that. JH, we're gonna ask more.
Yeah. Did we want to talk about part two about like class? Like I've heard this from a lot of fusion teams that they feel like classical dance is not necessarily appreciated as much. I was wondering if, from your perspective, from a classical team attending some fusion comps, or even just being a classical team in general, what you thought about that.
Honestly, I feel like we got a lot of hype at those competitions from fusion teams too. I remember them being like a great time, even if it was a lot of people like from fusion teams, for example, saying, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know you guys did this. That's just so different from fusion." I feel like if they didn't have that appreciation before, it at least sparked a little bit in some people. And that was like a nice feeling to interact after performing.
Yeah, I think it's just that people don't know what the classical circuit looks like. Everyone, if they weren't a dancer themselves, they know someone who was and has seen at least one performance. It's so rich in the abhinaya and hand gestures, it can be difficult to understand. But like Apurva said, the fusion comps that we've been to, people really enjoyed it once they know what it can look like. So shameless plug to go watch any of the Origins pieces or any classical circuit pieces. I think you'd have a good time doing so.
Honestly, I think it's also fun in a way, like feeling really inspired by a bunch of different things. When we talk about inspiration for things in our choreo, we get inspired by things we've done before or elements that we see in other classical teams, but it's also stuff from fusion pieces or music videos or just things that you see out and about in your life. So I feel like the more arts that you expose yourself to, the better.
There's
Yeah,
I
really
just
want
want
to
to add like
emphasize what.
this is the
Darshini, you go.
okay.
Darshini,
Wait,
you
I'll just
go.
add to Apurva's point real quick. Just to emphasize, like, yes, we absolutely do take flavors of other dance styles when we choreograph our own pieces. Like, already I can think of steps that we've literally taken from like a K-pop music video and hip hop steps and contemporary. Like, I think drawing knowledge from those different sources is what helps make our piece very unique and come up with very creative choreography. And it just shows like all dance is connected one way or another. And it's really fun to experiment with all of that.
I was just gonna add, as a freestyler, I've been trying to get into hip-hop styles and watching people on stage doing Bharatanatyam. I was like, whoa, I can take freestyling in a different way. And it was a big realization for me, like when I was experimenting with it. I was like, whoa, because there's this style called crumping where you're stomping your feet a lot. And in Bharatanatyam, you're not stomping your feet, but you're hitting your heels to the floor. And I was like, wait, you could do this in a different way and have a totally unique style with it. And I had a lot of fun playing around with that.
I did want to ask about how you guys think in terms of like choreoing. Like, how does that choreo process work? Do you guys first get the formations done, or do you guys get the steps done? Or do you guys get the music and then get the steps? If there's a totally different way you're thinking about how to choreo, like I'd love to hear that. Of course, in addition to like how you incorporate everyone else's choreo too.
Yeah, usually how it goes is that once we flesh out the different scenes that we want to have in the piece, we talk about the vibe of it, like any high points or low points, or like just any heightened emotional points of the scene. And then we all collectively search for music. So we look for music, we all listen to different examples, we talk about what we like and dislike, like the same process of narrowing it down, listening to more comments, narrow it down more, and then once we decide on the music for a scene, we start choreographing after that. Me personally, I'm a very like formations focused person. Like I like to think about formations first or what are like interesting or dynamic ways that you can use the stage and use the whole space. So that's where my mind first goes with choreo. Darshini.
Sure. I think it depends. Like sometimes it is especially helpful to have formation first and then you figure out how to fill in the blanks with steps. But it just depends. Like sometimes the steps come first, like you hear the music and you're like, oh, this particular step would look really good. And so you have to come up with a formation that like really exemplifies that step because not all formations are going to be the best way to demonstrate that specific step. And again, coming back to how, especially in classical, like we try our very hardest to give every formation and every step meaning. And I love seeing all of the other teams and the ways that they come up with that. It is so cool. If I can give a few examples, I remember, I think 2 years ago, maybe last year, Rice Resigas, they had done a piece on Arachne. And so their last formation was an X because it was her like turning into a spider. And I was like, wow, that makes so much sense there. And then GT Pulse one year, they had this river scene in theirs, and so they had three lines and the team they did a ripple going up and down, and so that is something that I think worked very well in that particular formation that like is not going to come across in a V or a semicircle or something like that. So when we're doing that choreo, we're very intentional about what is this scene showing? What are some formation ideas that can bring that about specifically symbolically? And then what are some steps that, again, carry the story, is symbolic, or in some cases, just matching the energy of the music and the scene.
Could you talk more, if you can, about how each step in each formation adds meaning? Because I've recently been struggling with that in terms of dance is movement in terms of the music and how you're trying to convey music, but then also within a lot of performances and stories, we're not trying to just convey the music and how that musicality looks, but also what extra meaning do we want to add to our movements. So I was wondering if you could talk more about that.
I think I have like a specific example, maybe, and it helps again that all of the mudras inherently have meaning to them. Like they've just been given a definition of some sort. Um, for example, in our most recent piece, done the story of Abhimanyu. It's basically that fetus child listens to its father explaining a battle formation and how to enter the battle formation but not exit it. And so what we had our other dancers do is amplify the child listening inside. So like doing hand gestures that show that the child is listening, like pointing to the child, and just sometimes like by meaning it really is referring to amplifying the abhinaya that a particular character is showing. Sometimes we'll decide what the other dancers are doing first and then set what characters are doing, or sometimes we set what characters are doing and then figure out what everyone else can do. And then I guess I'm trying to think of other specific examples from last year. I remember there's this one scene where our evil character is planning a battle formation that's supposed to capture one of the good guys. This is something that I don't think anyone would really pick up on. I looked at battle formations that were used during the Mahabharata so I could get inspiration for it and see if there's anything unique slash cool looking. So we had this one formation where it was like we all started out in a line and then popped out into a V, and that was like something that I had read about. So I was like, okay, cool, this fits. If someone happens to get it, like awesome. And even if it doesn't, it looked cool and looked like some kind of a tactical formation.
That's amazing that you bring that much intentionality to that. Like,
I want to ask, I know y'all really wanted to talk about what y'all do with your team culture and how y'all really changed how y'all approach your team as leaders, right? Was there anything else that y'all wanted to really talk about that y'all had coming into this podcast?
I actually told the team that I would come help out with their AV week practice for today at 9, but 9:15 is fine. I know they'll be there until midnight.
Just tell them you'll see my face on TikTok in a few days.
who's
Okay,
doing the editing, bro?
but yeah, they'll get your advice through TikTok, so it'll work out.
But Apurva, what about you?
Um, Sorry, I know I'm looking through the questions that you had sent us earlier, and there's
Oh, I
like,
meant like time-wise.
oh,
Yeah.
I'm good, I'm
Okay.
fine.
I'm just gonna go send them a text and I'll be back.
If we, I'll see if Darshini has any questions, but if we don't, then I was just thinking we could end off with what's the best piece of advice you received? What's the best piece of advice you could give?
Hmm.
And then maybe funny moments during mokshas. And also, I guess, what moksha means to you. That can be like the nice closing statement.
I feel like
What does
I kind
moksha
of
mean to
answered
you?
that last one a little bit, or I feel like you can answer that if you want, but
What do you want to talk about?
I don't know, there's a lot here.
Wait, what?
Is there anything that we missed?
I think there's one thing that the
Yeah.
two of us wanted to emphasize, that being like, we sound like we know so much, but so much of it was trial and error. We're not perfect all the time, but I think the whole time we did our best to be constantly reevaluating how we're doing and improving as much as we can. A lot of this stuff we're able to talk about in hindsight. And just like to anyone who's currently captaining, I would say it's not going to be perfect. and it's not going to be easy, but it's definitely worth, and you're doing your best. I just want people to remember that it's a learning process. I think especially as captain, there was a lot of times where I felt like I needed to have all the answers and I needed every practice to be perfectly efficient. But sometimes it doesn't happen, and sometimes it's not even because of something that you were not able to do. So I think as long as you are striving for constant improvement and being flexible with a lot of things, especially things that are not in your hand, that is the most that you can ask of yourself.
Yeah, I could not have said that better. Do your best given the circumstances that you're given, and also give yourself grace for the circumstances that you're given. And extend that to your team also. Think about that for everyone else on your team too. I guess it's a little bit of a cliche to say, but like everyone's college experience is so different. You truly don't know what other people are going through, what other people are bringing to the team, what they can't bring to the team on a given day.
Yeah, something I wanted to add to the captain's perspective is like, at least I see within the conversation so far, and within you two, it's also not that I have to be perfect, I have to be the best, but also some part of it is like being vulnerable and being human and allowing yourself to also enable other people to do their best work too, and to allow them to be involved and to allow them to be, because it's also making space for other people is something a captain could do that doesn't have to do with them, but just the way they're able to make space for other people enables so much more. And I think that's a good leadership trait. Mhm.
That's
Okay.
a great leadership trait, dude. Y'all take a lot of risks as leaders to be like, you know what, we're not gonna have post mixer practice. That's a huge, to be in that mindset is to be ready to take a lot of risk. I think that's what makes you all such great leaders. And what Jay said, everything. So
Apurva, is there anything that you wanted to add or anything else? Because I could just do the two questions and then we're done.
Um, yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay. Oh, also, before I forget, I'm really glad that you guys said that because there's a class I told Darshini this, or no, Darshini, that a person who messaged me on Unleash GDN talked about that being a captain is really hard, and I'm really glad you released that short. Well, being a captain is tough and you don't know what's going on. Yeah, I hope I'm able to create a short out of this, and hopefully that will reach other people who are struggling with the same things. Okay, to wrap it up, what's the best piece of advice you ever received, and what's the best piece of advice you could give? That was already covered, but any other things?
Um,
Oh, wait. And if you want to add, another option is how do you think classical dance has made an influence and impact in your life? If that might work better. Or any lessons you took away from it. You can think.
I think I also just want to add, Apurva's, not that I don't like this question, Jage, but I'm just wondering if there's maybe some more specific things that we could cover that might be a little more helpful, maybe, to other classical teams and stuff. If you have any thoughts, Apurva. Because I know you suggested the Abhinaya one. That could be something to talk about, maybe.
actually, that is an interesting topic.
This podcast is for you guys, it's not for us. Whatever you guys want to say is what matters more.
There was a question on there that you had talking about Abhinaya, and it goes back a little bit to what we were talking about with origins and like the classical circuit and like the implications of what it being a competition means. And it was interesting. And it's something that is part of a little bit of a larger thing that I think we've touched on a little bit already, which is talking about what do you compromise on or what do you have to cut out to make a successful competition piece or a successful group piece when you have 8 to 16 or however big, like some teams get really big, right? 7, 6, with such a range of people, what do you have to like cut out to make for a successful competition piece? And Abhinaya is a very key part of that conversation. It's always interesting because it's something that we talk about as a team and something that always comes up in judges' feedback and things is Abhinaya and expression and storytelling is often something that is very personal and something that when you're taught, and I'm sure a lot of people who have backgrounds in acting may resonate with this too, but it's something that you're taught to be like, oh, connect with your own emotions and bring it out from a reason that you can think of for yourself that's a little bit more personal. So Abhinaya is a very like personal kind of experience with how you learn how to do it and how even you do it for a different piece and how you interpret different characters or different circumstances. Like anger as an emotion is going to look so different on every person's face. And that makes it like really hard, one, to teach Abhinaya or teach expressions, but also like to get at what Darshini was talking about earlier with standardizing by virtue of this classical circuit and the way you're communicating your story and your information. There is, to an extent, you do want people to look the same so that you are giving one clear message to the audience. You're like telling them what you want them to understand about your piece, about your movements, about your story. But also, does that mean that you are stifling people's individual creativity, people's individual interpretations and expression? And I think that's an interesting conversation and sometimes an interesting trade off to have because it's a fine line to walk between having something be like standardized and similar and having something be dramatic and understandable, but not having it be played up or like too dramatic.
And I think a way that we really try to work on that is by helping the team develop an inner dialogue. So, what a character is really thinking at any given point. And we really, for example, if you take a blanket expression like anger, like we really as a group talk through, okay, do we mean fury? Do we mean jealousy? Do we mean annoyance? Because all of those are very different. And the specific, the way that you set your eyebrows and your mouth, like all of that changes depending on how, like, that specific expression that you're trying to get at. And it's like the abhinaya is so important for everyone, regardless of whether you're a character or not. If anything, like more so important if you're not a character, because your role is to amplify like the character's fury or the character's grief. And so you really need everyone to be matching the vibes and like matching the tune of the song and each other in order for that to be very clear to an audience. And in terms of what Apurva was talking about with compromising, I think something that I really learned from working with our main characters this past season is figuring out like what naturally works in a person, if that makes sense. Usually, like what Apurva has been able to do for me and what I hopefully have also done with our other characters is really talk through that inner dialogue and be like, okay, like what are the literal words that the character is saying and what are they thinking? Because maybe that's a different thing, right? We all know what mixed feelings are like, and we all know what it's like to say one thing and really be thinking another. And so it's interesting to be able to talk through that with a dancer and figure out like what works for them and what really for that individual is going to exemplify the abhinaya. And the example for me that I think of is that there's a specific like arrogant looking movement that I wanted one of our characters to do. And it just didn't look the way that I had pictured it looking when she had done it. And I think originally it was like, okay, I really want a way to make this be the step that she does. But I think I remember Apurva later working with her and finding a different step that still really conveyed that expression and that ego and arrogance, but it wasn't the same step. It was something that just worked so much better with her. And so that's ultimately the goal, is to not have to do a specific step, but to have that energy and expression come across, I think. Abhinaya, again, I think it just comes from being comfortable with the choreo, because once you're comfortable with the choreography, then you can really focus on your expressions. And that takes time, that takes a lot of talking about the story. That takes, like, we do Abhinaya workshops where we have everyone sit down in front of a partner and just do the expressions, like minimal hand gestures, no movement, like actual steps, just emoting, so we can really hone in on the way that they're demonstrating the abhinaya and perhaps like some suggestions for making it stronger, toning it back, whatever we need at that specific moment.
I'm gonna be back.
I'm glad you brought that up, Darshini.
Why were you so passionate to talk about that specifically?
I just think it's such a like I said, it's something that I think just comes up a lot.
Continue.
Sorry, I something that comes up a lot, and I think for us, like it's something that has come up in our conversations as a team and also like from
Mm.
judges, and I just think it's something that like so many people have such different opinions on that.
I also just really love Abhinaya as a concept. I think that's what gives your story life. You can have whatever steps you want, but it's through the Abhinaya that an audience who doesn't is not familiar with the dance language. I'm going to say that again because I sounded so weird. It's through the Abhinaya that an audience who's not familiar with the dance language understands the story that you're telling, right? That's what Bharatanatyam and any Indian classical dance, these are art forms that are thousands of years old. Like, how in modern time have they still survived? It's because it touches on these very basic foundations of what it means to be human. And that would be our Abhinaya, that would be our emotions, that would be our expression. So I think it really brings a piece to life. And so it's something that I really enjoy working on. And I think it's what makes our work special.
I have a guest named Teddy.